Season 5, Episode 28 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. I am Jonathan Lidskin. To my right is Sam Federman, and below me is Rocco Miller, back once again to help us preview some more conferences. We got through all 5 of the high major leagues. We are going to move in now to some of the bigger mid-major leagues, and I am very pleased to welcome Rocco in tonight to help us preview Mountain West, the WCC, and the Big West. Rocco, how are you doing?
Jonathan, I'm doing great. Sam, good to see you as well. Here we are. We're less than, I think, 12 days for the season opener, less than 2 weeks. For me, it's flown by just doing all the schedule, consulting, and work throughout the off season. But, there was still teams looking for games entering this week. I think a game just got done today between Appalachian State and North Texas, actually. So it's just kind of crazy, but it's a great way to stay busy. Really excited to finally see these teams play games that count, that matter. And, with so much movement in the portal and across the coaching carousel, which had a record 67 coaching changes, we have so many questions that need to be answered. It'll just be good to start piecing that together.
Sam, I know you took a beating from one of my beloved Valley team's fan bases today, but how are you?
Well, I've been pronounced an enemy of the state by Bradley fans. So I could be doing better. That doesn't bother me at all. I enjoy getting to discuss college basketball online. It's a blessing to have the platform that I do. And it is awesome to be able to discuss college basketball with you and with Rocco tonight. We're just 13 days away from college basketball, just 14 days away from the election night special on the Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers podcast, where we will be covering everything but the election. All right, we'll get into the teams that we're going to be watching on that night later. But Jonathan, you want to start us off unless you got anything else?
No, I do want to talk a little about the Mountain West as a conference right now because.
One more thing. A10 preview tomorrow night, 9 p.m. We're welcoming in Tyler Cronin from the 3-Bid League podcast. So definitely tune in to that if you are here right now and if you like the A10, or if you're not here right now and you like the A10, or if you're here right now and you don't like the A10, still tune in to hate watch, I guess.
Yeah, so the Mountain West has become one of the more polarizing leagues in the country over the last couple of years in terms of basketball. It is a league that is breaking up very, very sadly. We've had a lot of great basketball memories from this conference, but over the last couple of years, the Mountain West has gotten a plethora of teams into the NCAA tournament. A lot of early exits for these teams, which has led people to kind of criticize the league and say, like, oh, they don't deserve the bids they do. And whether that's true or not, the Mountain West has been one of the more talked about leagues in the country, and that's great for the league as a whole. Rocco, I'll start with you here. What do you think the Mountain West sort of looks like in its is this its final year, or are they
Penultimate.
2 more years?
Okay, 2 more years. So what do you think the Mountain West sort of looks like as a whole at the moment, and what is like sort of the future of some of these programs, whether it's in this league or in a different league?
Well, you can't talk about the Mountain West without mentioning the fact that it's the most beautifully and perfectly named conference, because you literally have half the teams in the mountains and the other half the teams in the West. And when you travel to the mountains, it is a beast for the teams from the West. And when the mountain teams travel to the West, it's a beast for them to play well as well. So that's probably my favorite part of the league. That won't fully go away. We're still keeping a portion of each in the Go Forward League, adding even Hawaii and UTEP in 2 years, which will make that factor even more extreme. UTEP at altitude, Hawaii as far west as you can imagine. So had to call that out. But I think, the overall theme of the league is you have places like Viejas, you have the Pit at New Mexico, you have the Spectrum at Utah State, you have the recent success at Colorado State making Moby a madhouse for home games. You have Boise State, who consistently gets to the tournament, I think 4 out of the last 5 years, with great home crowds and a tough trip for teams to make. So I think the theme of the league, Lawler is a great place to play. If you're a Nevada fan, they rarely lose there. The theme of the league is it's really, really hard to get a road win, especially in those top 6 or 7 places. Even Laramie, Wyoming, a lot of top teams will go in there and get upset. You see that every year. That's made this league extremely unique. I also think that plays into your larger comment about the NCAA tournament failures. You see how the NCAA tournament's set up with 8 locations nationwide. We only get 2 here in the West. Usually one of those is in the far West Coast. Every once in a while, the mountains will get a spot, like Denver will have a spot this year in the first and second round. But I think that actually puts Mountain West usually at a disadvantage. They'll get sent somewhere east or to the Midwest and play somebody kind of in a quasi road game. And not to make excuses for them, but I just want to defend the league a little bit because there's great basketball. You can look at the amount of guys from these programs that are playing in the NBA right now. If you want to translate it that way, you can look at the coaches, which is my favorite thing to do. Brian Dutcher has been probably one of the most consistent college basketball coaches the last 2 decades that still left coaching. Now, especially with Tony Bennett gone now. So there are, and Steve Alford can coach his ass off. There's a lot of great coaches, Leon Rice, and the list goes on. Now welcoming another great coach in Jared Calhoun. So there's so much to say about the league. And last year was kind of a gut shot straight. You know, I interviewed 7 different committee members of the 12 about 2 weeks after the bracket came out, and did get it confirmed from all 7 of them that New Mexico would not have been in the tournament, even if they lost the conference championship game. So I think that was very interesting, despite being number 22 in the net. As you guys know, what you do in championship week seems to not matter as much. A lot of those decisions are made. And, man, we would be hearing from New Mexico fans the last 8 months straight if that would have happened. Luckily for them, luckily for the league, it didn't happen, and they got all 6 teams in, even though 2 of them still kind of got disrespected by being sent to Dayton. But what a league for the year! What a year for the league, and it would be, near impossible for them to repeat that this year.
Sam, anything to add on that?
I just want to add, like, the fact that the Mountain West kind of got as pillaged as it did kind of surprised me. I thought that these programs would maybe have a little bit more. Especially like San Diego State, I thought they would be able to keep some of the guys that they lost. But I think, it makes sense that Utah State would keep guys, but they also lost guys with a new coach coming in. I think that it's going to be a difficult year considering how many of the best players left. I don't think the Mountain West is quite as good, especially at the top as it has been in the past few years. I'm not sure if there's more. I don't know if this is more than a 3-bid league this year.
Yeah, this is certainly going to be an interesting year for the league in terms of all the players they lost. There's a lot of new talent in the league, a lot of guys that will kind of have to take over the reins of programs with some of the players that the league lost. We're gonna go here in order of my projected power rankings of the league. We're not going to talk about every team in full like we did with all the high major leagues, but we will sort of touch on every program, at least to some extent. So we're going to start with my favorite to win the league today. They were the number 1 team in my mid-major top 25 for this year to start the year, and that is Boise State. So this is a team that returned some key players in Tyson Dagenhart, Omar Stanley, both all-conference guys. Chris Lockett's an intriguing piece. They bring in Alvaro Cardenas from San Jose State, who had a really good year playing for Tim Miles in this conference. Andrew Meadows back. He's kind of been in the rotation. They bring in Dylan Anderson from Arizona as well. Rocco, I'll start with you. Boise State, you mentioned it, has been a really consistent program over the last couple of years. Is this the year they can sort of take a step up and maybe be like a second weekend team?
The opportunity is right there in front of them. Now, I think, when I was with them at the Final Four last year, I was with a lot of the staff watching the games. It was a great time. And at that time, they thought they were getting Chibuzo Agbo back, who, of course, ended up at USC later in the process, entered the portal probably a couple weeks after we were hanging out. But at that time, the coaching staff felt like they were a dark horse Final Four caliber team. I think they had a good idea that both Dylan Anderson and Alvaro Cardenas were coming in. And then, of course, you've got the stars in Tyson DeGenhart and Omar Stanley. We later found out they brought in Javon Buchanan, who has just got all the upside in the world and had, we don't know much about secret scrimmages, but his box score in that first secret scrimmage in their blowout win over Washington was rather encouraging, let's just say. So yeah, this team it has high expectations for themselves. They got dealt with a brutal draw last year, having to play Colorado, who was also underseeded drastically in the playing game. So they've got a chip on their shoulder for sure. I do think they belong as the favorite going in, just because San Diego State's that team that's owned it. They are that earned it. They are the staple of the league year in and year out. But I think just the combination of all the pieces that still are there without Agbo and Alvaro Cardenas could not have been the better. You can't find a better puzzle piece to fit. The guy knows the league. He's one of the most unsung heroes in the league. Most people don't know about him because he's on San Jose State the last 3 years. I remember when he enrolled as a freshman, right over here at San Jose. So he is a dream to watch. The way he handles the ball, the way he sees the court. He's not going to be expected to score 13 points a game like he did last year, but he can if you need him to. And he's gonna find these guys open and a lot of scoring weapons around him. And if Dylan Anderson, he was a big time recruit out of high school coming into Arizona. Obviously, with Arizona's front court, he kept getting buried there the last couple of years. This could be a guy that really, really breaks out at 7 feet tall. Now, again, he's got a crowded front court next to him, so maybe not looking at playing more than 20 or so minutes a night. But man, this team's got a pretty good upside if they can click on all cylinders.
Yeah, I'm going to add more on Javon Buchanan. I think he can be an NBA prospect. I was listening to the No Ceilings podcast, a bunch of friends of the program over there. Maxwell Bombach does No Stone Unturned every single year, and he is tremendous. He was talking about Javon Buchanan, and just he likes him. I don't remember if it was him or Steven that was like Steven was like the dissenter. He was a little bit lower on Buchanan, but I think Buchanan, the ceiling for Boise State is a scenario where Javon Buchanan really hits. This is a guy who averaged crazy numbers. He averaged 20 a game plus at Indiana Wesleyan, was an NAIA All-American, can shoot, finished 67% at the rim. If he really hits, and he is a player of the year type, which is not out of the question, I wouldn't bank on it, but it's not out of the question. If he's a first team, maybe second team guy, that's where Boise State can hit their ceiling, not only win the league, but finish as a top 30-ish team and get like a 5, 6, 7 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think that is in the cards if Buchanan can be as good as he is. And Jonathan, how big of an Omar Stanley fan I am. Mm-hmm. We talked about this a lot last year. Super physical, 6'8", big man, came from St. John's, can rebound, can stretch the floor as well, can move really well. I really don't think there's anything that when you go out and tell Omar Stanley to do something that he's not really capable of doing on the floor for a reasonable big man. I think he can be another guy that has player. There's 3 guys on his team that I could see winning player of the year. I think that is the argument. That is one of the arguments to make for Boise State. Although I have them second in the league, there are 3 guys on this team. I haven't even mentioned Tyson Dagenhart, who was the preseason player of the year in the league, as another guy who could be a player of the year. There's 3 guys on this team that could win player of the year in some universe. Now, I would say it's unlikely for Buchanan and Stanley, like less than 5% each. But Dagenhart is really good as well, and we know how good Leon Rice is.
Yeah, I could see this team having up to 4 all-conference guys at season end. And like one of the reasons I do like this team so much is because I feel like they addressed their issues really well. They really had no rim protection last year outside of Omar Stanley. Like Cam Martin was their backup center, who just, to put it bluntly, isn't really a center. And they went out and got the 7-footer in Anderson. Roddy Anderson had a really disappointing year for them, I thought, and like they really addressed the point guard spot with Cardenas. And then, losing guys like Ogbo, like Max Rice is tough, but like Javon Buchanan, we mentioned, is a good player. And I think this is a year that they could really potentially take a jump up into like maybe even like the top 20 in KenPom. And then speaking of KenPom, my number 2 team in this conference is a team that finished 5th in the league last year, but they were actually 1st in the league by KenPom, and that's San Diego State. Could never really doubt Brian Dutcher. He runs a great defensive system. Obviously, they were in a Final Four not too long ago. And this is a roster that, it's a little unfamiliar to some people that don't follow college basketball at a super high level. They do bring back Reese Waters, but this is a lot of new names in terms of who's going to be getting real minutes for this team. Rocco, we've heard so much about this team and who's going to be the breakout guy. What have you heard, and what do you think this team is going to look like offensively? Who else besides Reese Waters and maybe Nick Boyd is going to score points for this team?
Yeah, I mean, well, we know guys like Wayne McKinney can fill it up. It would be interesting what his entire role looks like, if he will step into a primary, or he'll be a secondary, or even just a sixth man guy. But the name I think everybody's thinking about these last couple of days is BJ Davis, who just went off for 28 points against UCLA. Again, in a scrimmage setting where San Diego State had 5 scholarship guys out. Nick Boyd still coming back from an ankle. A few other guys are still nursing injuries. So we don't know if that was just a one-hit wonder in a scrimmage, or if BJ is really going to step forward here. Didn't play a lot as a freshman, so but he's clearly got game. His shooting numbers were ridiculous on that stat sheet. But beyond that, it's a little bit of a guessing game. I think the one guy who might be undervalued, especially out here in the West, that don't watch a lot of Conference USA, is Jared Coleman-Jones. I think he plugs in perfectly, and we've seen almost every year San Diego State, obviously with Ladie coming out and really breaking out last year and being a dominant player. We've seen it in the past with other transfers that come into that same exact position in this system. And Jared Coleman-Jones could really do that, not only offensively, but defensively for the Aztecs. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but the number 1 defensive rebounder in all of Conference USA last year in terms of defensive rebounding percentage was Coleman-Jones. So this is a perfect fit for the Dutcher system. And you got other guys like Miles Heide and Pharaoh Compton as an upside freshman, might get to play quite a bit. So I think when it's all said and done, assuming they get to full strength, we're so early on, and nobody's really talking about injuries much. Obviously, injuries will change everything. If Boyd's out until December or January, they're going to need these pieces because they aren't as deep as usual on paper. However, they got a nice mix of 4 seniors, some guys that can make the sophomore leap, and some good incoming freshmen. So you got to figure by the end of the year, they're going to be playing the best defense in this league and probably a top 5 to 10 defense nationally.
I love this front court. I think it's going to be one of the best front courts in all of mid-major college basketball. You mentioned Jared Coleman-Jones. He is a post-up guy, roll man, but he can step out and hit threes, and I think that was something that he really made strides for last season. If that continues, he could be a legitimate star. And all the buzz around San Diego State this offseason has been Magoun Guaf, this 7-footer who can apparently do everything for them. He had 8 turnovers in their secret scrimmage against UCLA. So there's that. But he's going to need a little bit of time to kind of settle into the college game. But he also scored 20 points. I think it was it 10 or 20? He can score, he can rebound, he can block shots. He's 7 feet tall. He's athletic as hell. I think San Diego State is going to get a lot out of Magoun Guaf this year. I know Austin Mitchell is going to appreciate me saying that. He's been talking to me about Magoun Guaf all summer. Reese Waters, we thought he was going to break out 3 years ago. He's not, but at this point, year 5, he is what he is. And what he is a solid contributor. Boyd, McKinney, BJ Davis. I think those are all solid players. I think, though, this year's team is going to have a little more of an offensive slant than what we've seen in past years. I don't think Jared Coleman-Jones is an awesome defender. I think he is more of an offensive slant guy. This backcourt is also a little more offensive slant, especially with Davis instead of Boyd. And at that point, I think we're looking at a little more of an offensive slant. Obviously, I think they'll still be awesome defensively, especially with Guaf, Compton, Miles Heide, Waters coming back. But I definitely think that they're going to be more offense slanted than what we've seen from them.
Yeah, I shouldn't say nobody, but almost nobody does a better job of roster building at the mid-major level than Brian Dutcher. He knows exactly what he needs to make a successful team. And I will never doubt the guy. He consistently wins games, and even if the roster right now doesn't look like it could be top tier, like I bet this team that's back in the NCAA tournament again. I do want to real quick address Farrell Compton, who is a freshman I really like. You watch the guy and you just like you know he's a Brian Dutcher guy. Like not afraid to play with his nose down. He'll go up and rebound for you at 6'6". He's a really intriguing piece and has a really college-ready body already. Let's get to number 3 for me, and we'll start to speed it up a little more here so we can touch on all these teams. But New Mexico under Richard Pitino is number 3 for me. The Mountain West sort of like 1 through 6, I feel like is really jumbled on just a yearly basis. You do have years where San Diego State sort of separates themselves from the pack, but for the most part, a lot of these teams are just really good basketball teams. New Mexico's losing some guys. No longer have Jalen House, no longer have Jamal Mashburn, no longer have JT Toppin. And those are 3 tough guys to replace, but you had CJ Noland from North Texas. I'm not going to be able to pronounce his name, but Philip from Arizona. Very intriguing piece there. And then you have some guys in True Washington off the bench, who was a freshman last year who played for you. Some younger guys that are bound to step up. I do have some questions about this bench, but we'll stay with the theme of starting with Rocco. What are your thoughts on this New Mexico team?
Yeah, it's an interesting mix that is still there. I think it can definitely work because last year, if you remember, when Donovan Dent was called upon, somewhat surprisingly in the beginning, because both either House or Mashburn was out for the majority of the first 2 months, one or the other. They kept one of them out for a week, the next other one out for another week. So the good news for Dent was his development came on even faster than expected, and he rose to the occasion. He was their best player from almost the entire year, actually. And now he is that guy. So a thinner roster with less cooks in the kitchen, I think is better for Dent. Like, it's his team now, in my opinion. And I think you still have solid guards around him. CJ Noland, as you mentioned, is a defensive stalwart that can also score the ball. Coming from that North Texas program, was highly successful. True Washington is a guy that they're very high on there. I talked to Richard Pitino about him last week. And, natural sophomore jump. We'll talk about that with several rosters tonight. And I think in the front court, I know we have a note in here on what they're going to get out of it. I think they're going to be able to get a lot because Nelly Jr. Joseph last year started and played in every game, 35 games last year. A long run, of course, in the Mountain West tournament provided that many pieces of data for us. And NJJ, quite frankly, only fouled out 1 time in 35 games. So he's a responsible defender. He's a clean player on both sides of the ball and a threat to the other defense. Mustafa Amzil's been around between here and Dayton for a long time, going into his 5th year. And I like, bringing in just a solid piece like Atiki Ali Atiki, who they loved at BYU, just as that bench spark plug, come in and, clean up a couple rebounds, get a block shot here and there. That's a nice guy to interchangeably use in bigger matchups, bigger front courts. And they like the Arizona transfer in the front court as well with Philip Borvikaninen, I think is his name. So yeah, there's a lot here. Plus they have 4 solid freshmen in the freshman class in case they run into depth problems. Overall, I think they project as a very near the bubble type of team once again.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of Mountain West right near that bubble. I have them top 5 in my mid-major top 25. You mentioned the Nelly stat. That's something that has surprised me because at Iona, Nelly was not exactly the most responsible. He didn't always play smart. Rick Pitino got really mad at him for it, and I think that was Rick knew how talented he was and kind of wanted to get the best out of him.
Yeah,
but just like Nelly kind of drove him up a wall. And it was not surprising to me that Rick said, I'm not taking you to St. John's, but I'll trust you with my son. And something like
funny
that.
How that works.
That it was very unsurprising to me. I think you mentioned True Washington. I think he's going to have a big year. You mentioned Boro Vikinen. They love him because he can be a 6'8" guard skills type wing, while Amzil can kind of be more like the bridge guy that can play physical down low and step out. I think Donovan Dent is probably my pick for player of the year if I had a choice. I know I said Boise State had a bunch of guys that could win player of the year, but I think Donovan Dent is my pick for preseason player of the year. He's the best playmaker in the conference now that Isaiah Stevens is gone, because he has NBA level vision and delivery. He sees passes that nobody else in college basketball right now sees, and then he's able to make those passes and execute at such a high level on hitting cutters, hitting guys ahead. Those hit ahead passes in transition, he's so good at them as well. And he's just awesome as a player in transition as well. He really understands his leverage, and he really understands so much about how to be a point guard, and he's explosive too. I think Donovan Dent has a chance to be one of the best point guards in all of college basketball this year.
Yeah, I was singing the Donovan Dent praises all of last year. Liked House, liked Mashburn, but I didn't really think that either of them were as important to that team's success as Dent. Like, he's a guy, like you said, Sam, that has tremendous passing ability. He was efficient, shot the ball really well last year. He was a 37% 3-point shooter on, like, I know low volume last year, but that was a New Mexico team that kind of like relied a lot on rim pressure, and he gave you that too, and did a great job setting guys up. Like, he is also my pick for player of the year in this league. And, like, you know, I just like the CJ Noland edition. They needed a little more shooting. I think they get that. And Noland, even if he's not like the highest volume guy, this is another like very solid roster. And, like, I know that people have kind of raved when Cade Dotson committed there, that it was a really important commitment for them to get him, one of the best in the program history. Let's get on to Utah State at number 4. This is the one team in the top 6, in the 6 that made the NCAA tournament last year, that has a new coach. That is Jared Calhoun. Comes over there from the Horizon League. And this is a team that I think is filled with like some really intriguing pieces. Sam, I'm going to start with you on this one, because I know you've been singing the Tucker Anderson praises for almost a year now. And there are some other really pieces on this team that you really like as well.
We were talking about Utah State like right after the Big 12 pod with Isaac Trotter. I don't know how we got to this point. I think he said something about DJ Thomas as like a top 50 player in college basketball. We'll get into that later, but and I was talking about how much I liked Utah State, and it's because I love this Utah State team. They have 3 guys whose initials are DA. So they have 3 district attorneys. That's more than like 90% of places in this country.
Interesting. Yeah.
Drake Allen and Dayton Albury is a sick combo of point guards. Drake Allen can be like the bigger guard, while Dayton Albury at 6'2" is so fast. He's lightning fast. He's one of the fastest point guards in this conference. Donovan Dent and DJ Thomas are crazy fast too, but like Dayton Albury is really fast. Braden Housley is another fast guard. That's going to be a good pickup there. And Dexter Akano, the other DA, come off the bench, be a really good glue guy, minutes guy. Mason Falslev and Ian Martinez are both guys that can be double-digit scorers and more. Martinez was more. Falslev, I think, was around that mark. He's the best rim finishing guard in college basketball. He was 73% at the rim last year. Tucker Anderson is 6'9", and he shot 39% from 3 on a lot of attempts. He moved, and he's not like a stretch 4. He's a true 6'9" wing that can guard 4s. And that's why he's going to play the 4. He's not a great defender, but he can guard 4s. And then the duo of Isaac Johnson and Aubin Gadaretse, I think, is a really good center duo. And I think Jared Calhoun did a really good job putting this roster together, because they will score. This team will really score. And that's what Jared Calhoun seems to have always been known for at Youngstown State. Rocco?
Yeah, that plays well too in the spectrum. You know, you get up there in altitude and you start running. They've played that way under Odom and a little bit with Sprinkle as well, of course, with Darius Brown running up and down the court last year. It's going to play very well at home, and we'll see how it travels. I think the biggest knock on Calhoun up until 2 years ago was the defensive deficiencies on his teams, and I asked him about that at Media Day last week. In the end of the 22 season, they were 9th in the Horizon League in defensive efficiency. It really snake bit them in a lot of games, just giving up too many easy buckets. And if you look and you filter by Horizon Conference play only last year, gentlemen, you're going to find that the Youngstown State Penguins were number 1 in adjusted defense. And that was fascinating to me. They've learned and taken a lot of principles from different sources. Jared Calhoun is a very well-rounded coach in terms of the types of assistants he brings in, the types of advice he'll call overseas. He'll call to the Australian League, the European League. He's got a guy in Canada helping with the staff. So they're learning from all levels of basketball and how to improve. They're very analytically driven, fascinating program, fascinating coach to be involved with. And I'm very curious to see, with so many new pieces. And the other thing I joked about with him was, do you have a full-time staff member that's a scout for the Atlantic Sun Conference? And of course he laughed because, with Gadaresti and Tucker Anderson, of course, and Albury all coming from the A-Sun. It's an A-Sun all-star team coming to Utah State. But I think also, just last thought, is keeping Falslev, Ian Martinez, Isaac Johnson, as you guys know. Our friend Truly Donovan has said it many times before. Sometimes your best gets are the ones you keep. We actually thought, we being just me being a Washington guy originally from way back when, I have a big community of friends back home. And I think when Sprinkle was hired, we all thought probably Ian Martinez and maybe not Ian Martinez, but definitely Isaac Johnson and Falslev were going to follow with great Osobor. And to only get one of those 3 or 4 was a surprise at the Big Ten level. So it's a huge deal for him to retain those 3 guys and keep that continuity and grow from there.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job putting together this roster. You got 2 point guards, like Sam mentioned, that were higher usage guys at the previous schools, but will probably not be relied upon as much. But as a result, will probably be more efficient. You got guys in Martinez and Falslev that kind of understand the culture there and what is expected. Sam obviously talked about Tucker Anderson a lot. I'm a huge fan of Dayton Albury. I think he was phenomenal last year at Queens, and I think he'll have a great year, even if it is coming off the bench behind Drake Allen here. Utah State's a program that has had 2 coaches in the 2 previous years leave for better jobs, and I wouldn't at all be surprised if Jared Calhoun was also in these conversations to move up to the high major level if Utah State has a really good year here. Number 5 for me is
and don't forget, Ryan Odom was only there for 2 years, and Craig Smith was there before him for 3 years, made 2 tournaments. The other year would have made a tournament if it wasn't for COVID. This team has made 4 of the last 5 NCAA tournaments with 3 coaches. No one else in the country can say that.
Yeah, this is a program that if you win, people are going to take notice, and their coaches there have. Nevada at 5 for me. This is a team that lost some really key pieces in Keenan Blackshear and Jared Lucas from the previous team. But they have some returners. Nick Davidson should be an all-conference player. Trey Coleman's back. KJ Himes. All 3 were there last year. They take some interesting transfers. Kobe Sanders is a really big point guard that I'm very intrigued by. Chuck Bailey had a pretty good freshman season on an Evansville team that had some really good, bright moments last year at times. This is a new group for new group in a sense for Steve Alford, because he's going to be relying on some players that he hasn't had the last couple years. Rocco, can this Nevada team win the league, and will they get back to and what are their chances of getting back to the NCAA tournament with the pieces they lost?
Well, I think they still have a pretty formidable team in terms of, Nick Davidson took over the Mountain West Player of the Week honors 3 straight weeks last year. And of course, having a weapon like Jared Lucas on the perimeter and a weapon like Blackshear, just slashing and dicing and creating buckets all over the joint, certainly helped Davidson's case and freed him up. So that's where I'm kind of the most curious, is if, Trey Coleman, we kind of know what we're getting from him, but he'll have to take on a little bit bigger role this year. Daniel Foster's played some ball and been around 5 years. KJ Himes is one of my biggest question marks. He is coming back for his 6th year, but man, there's been so many nights where he's been a little bit of a subtraction by addition if he's in the lineup, just either getting into foul trouble too quickly or starting a ruckus with the other team. Maybe some of that's by design. I'm not sure. But I think the story is in a little bit of the backcourt as well, where Tyler Rollison's in that position to take a sophomore leap. They're really high on him. Effective outside shooter in limited sample size, 38% last year. Could really, really come on strong this year. We know Xavier Ducel's been now his third Mountain West school between Wyoming, Fresno, now Nevada. He's a sniper. And if there's enough weapons and you forget about Ducel, he'll make you pay like he did, the year Wyoming made that tournament run. So I like some of the other pieces as well. I think Udo Yamanouchi, I followed him at Portland pretty closely. He was just starting to come on strong last year before his injury. He's supposed to be fully recovered now, so we'll see how he develops. Justin McBride was originally an Oklahoma State Boynton recruit. Of course, Boynton gets fired, and now a chance to develop big time under Alfred as a sophomore at 6'8", interchangeable, play the 3, 4, 5. So yeah, I like a lot of the pieces, and I just like the fact that they also have a core of guys that were really important to last year's success. And I just thought that out of any team, the one thing about the 6 teams that got in last year, Nevada was the one that really proved they could win on the road. They beat 3 of those other 5 on the road, I believe, and they were the only team to win at Utah State all year, and I can attest to that because I was there. And Alfred won't let you forget that either. So they're going to be really well coached, and they've got a lot of experience and a couple guys ready to perhaps make that sophomore leap. So they're right there to be in contention.
Sam, you're muted.
I'm a little lower on Nevada. I'm just not all there with Kobe Sanders, and I think they're really going to need him to be like a legit guy, not like maybe not a first teamer, but a second teamer in order for this to work out. Because of how much they relied on Lucas and Blackshear to create for them. Sanders won't be a 31% usage guy like he was at Cal Poly, but he will be the highest usage guy on this team, most likely. And that's going to be really important. And I'm not fully sold on him. I think he played for a really bad team at Cal Poly. He's not the greatest outside shooter. He didn't really step up as a passer until last year. And I think that he could be really good. And that leap last year as a passer shouldn't be discounted. But he also a lot of his numbers come from like just kind of being better physically than guys at the Big West level. I'm not sure how much better physically he is than some of the guys that will be tasked at guarding him in the Mountain West. Now it does create lineup matchup problems for some teams, and I think that'll help because they also have Trey Coleman, who's 6'7". They have Davidson, who's 6'7". Ducel is 6'4". So this is a really big lineup. But teams are going to need to be able to match up with that compared to last year where they were a little bit smaller than this. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Kobe Sanders. If Trey Coleman can continue he shot 43% from 3 in conference play last year, 37% overall. If the 43%, if that number keeps getting closer and closer to 43%, then I can really see growth from this Nevada team. But I think that's really just variance. He could shoot 34% this year.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of factors here that I like. I mean, we obviously talked about Sanders and how good of a shooter Ducel is. I think this team's going to be a lot more balanced than they were a season ago. It was a lot of dependence on Blackshear to get to the rim and score at times. I don't feel like they'll have as many offensive possessions where it kind of just feels stale. And I do think that they can probably identify their strengths better. They were a really good 3-point shooting team last year and I didn't really feel like they took enough threes. And I think this roster they have this year maybe allows them to do that a little more than they did last year. And mainly because Blackshear was just a non-shooter. Not to say that he was a bad player by any means. He was phenomenal. But it does allow them to probably get more guys involved than a season ago. And then I'm really interested to see what role Chuck Bailey carves out on this team. It was undeniable last year that Evansville was a better team when he was on the floor. And I had him pegged as an all-conference guy had he stayed in the Valley this year. Probably, I think, will come off the bench for this team with the amount of experience Ducel has in the conference. But I think he'll certainly play a role. He'll give his all on both ends. And then the last of these 6 teams, I'm kind of lower on Colorado State, and I'm really nervous because there are some smart people both on this pod and not on this pod that have told me that I am too low on Colorado State. And one of those people is Sam Federman, who I will start with here on the Rams. Is this the year that Nico Medved not only has another like really, really good year, but could this possibly be his last in Fort Collins?
Yeah, it could. I think it's really only a matter of time. He could get any high major job. It's just a matter of who the other candidates are in a given year. Sorry about that. There's a issue with water in Syracuse, so I've been drinking basically only Gatorade recently. And that's not really sitting well with my throat. But on that, Nick Clifford, one of the best players in this conference, maybe the best defender on the wing in the conference. And if it's not him, it could be Jalen Crocker Johnson, who I'm higher on than I think anybody else in college basketball media. 6'8" wing, crazy long wingspan, was the all-time leading scorer at his high school in San Antonio, and a freaky long defender. Just really good impact that he had at Little Rock in year 1. Yeah. They like Keyshawn Williams. I think he's going to have a good year. Jalen Lake still there. Rashawn Mbemba taking a sophomore leap. And I know you're not going to like me saying this, Jonathan, but Bowen Bourne in a lesser role where he's not not relied upon as much, and
lesser is key with him.
And he's kind of playing as a second guy to what Clifford's going to be offensively and to what Williams is going to be offensively. I think it can be fine. Like, he was legitimately good 2 years ago. He was your pick last year for Player of the Year in the preseason, Jonathan.
He was.
And the fact that he was bad last year does not mean that he's going to be bad again. I also think maybe the change of scenery will really help him. I know Ben Jacobson's a great coach, but I still think going to Nico Medved is a little bit of an upgrade. And I think that'll help him. Playing with better players too. That Northern Iowa team last year wasn't really sure of what it was for a long time, and I think this Colorado State team will be sure of what it is. It's going to be Nick Clifford's team.
Rocco, any additional thoughts on the Rams?
Yeah, I mean, I think Clifford's certainly a pro, and upside to be Player of the Year if Colorado State has a great season. Some of that's out of his control. But yeah, I do think Bowen Bourne, when healthy, I think he played a lot of last year hurt. I'm not sure if that was mentioned, but if he can stay healthy and like you mentioned, Sam, be kind of either a 1 or a 2 option behind Clifford, that could certainly help him be a little more lethal. Crocker Johnson, could not agree with you more. I don't track all the media, so I really don't know where I stand in the media rankings here. But I can tell you that I like him a lot. He's the OVC Freshman of the Year. He's a big guy going into his sophomore year with a wingspan, and as you said, San Antonio all-time leading scorer at his high school. There's a ton to love. I'm not a big Keyshawn Williams guy as of late. He's only played 14 total games in 2 years because of injuries. Played on a really rough. It is unfortunate because Northern Illinois, the start of last year, they were expected to make a big jump. He goes down and only played 1 game last year. Only played 13 the year before because of injury. It's a lot. He's going to need to be like comeback Player of the Year for me to really jump out of my chair. But otherwise, it's hard to depend on him. I like getting some of that winning juice from Purdue and Ethan Morton. And of course, Jathan Lake and Rashawn Mbemba are gonna really contribute as well. So we'll see. I mean, again, like you guys have to understand, and I think you do, the Mountain West is all about who can win on the road. And I just don't know if this is a good enough roster to get road wins. If you can't get the road wins, you're not getting in the tournament.
I was surprised when they took Nicola Joppa. Jonathan, you remember this? I think I texted you, like, what on earth is going on in Fort Collins?
Yeah. I do remember this.
Because Joppa was like the 3rd best player on a bad LIU team. I kind of get it. He's 7 feet. He'll be just like a 7 to 10 minute a game backup if they get what they want out of Mbemba. and like maybe they play some small lineups with Morton or Crocker Johnson at the 5. I think they can kind of get away with Crocker Johnson at the 5 for like 5 minutes with his length, given how good he is defensively. I think Jalen Crocker Johnson can guard anybody in the Mountain West. I don't think there's a player that he can't guard.
You grab a guy like Joppa, just go out there and fill up some fouls, 3-4 fouls, and get him out of there, just to, extend the game and create a little bit of a different look.
Yeah, exactly. But I think between Nick Clifford and Jalen Crocker Johnson, this is the best defensive wing duo in the conference. It's really not even that close.
Yeah. Sam, not to steal the Kevin Sweeney line, but is the Joppa take a I'd rather have no pulse player?
No, I don't think he's that bad.
Okay.
It's just like, no, he was like, he has like half of a pulse.
Okay. Yeah, I think for Bowen Bourne, like I know I've said some things about him, but
like if they wanted to take a guy at LIU that doesn't have a pulse, like try the Stricklands. Or Gezim Bishrani, who's at like the same JUCO as I forget. PDT called him Seth Rogen.
Yeah. So like I know I've said some things about Bowen Bourne. Like Northern Iowa really did need him to create a lot of shots last year, but I think it kind of went over.
Oh, Madi Traore is at that same JUCO, and Jaquan Harris.
Northern Iowa had some players last year that I thought really could have taken a step forward offensively if given the opportunity, at least like counting stats wise. But if Nico Medved here can get Bowen Bourne to buy in, because Bowen Bourne like is a good passer when he chooses to be. It's not often that he completely chooses to be. But if they can get him down to like playing not like 30% of the shots, but like maybe closer to like 23 or 22, I think his shooting numbers will go up, and I think he could be a really effective player for this team. I just have to see it to believe it. All right, let's get into some of these other teams real quick. I don't want to – these next 5 all missed the tournament last year, but Rocco, I'll start with you. Which of these 5 teams between UNLV, San Jose State, Wyoming, Fresno, and Air Force can you see surprising people?
Well, I think most people, just being around media day last week, are looking at it as a bunch of 7 instead of a bunch of 6, with UNLV included. Of course, you can't forget UNLV went 12-6 last year in the league, in the best year of the league in terms of bids. So they had a heck of a conference year, but losing really silly games along the way. That crazy 35-point home loss to Air Force. The home loss to Southern, of course, early in the year. Just a head-scratching set of losses, kind of doomed UNLV otherwise. But they did win 12 games along the way and had some great wins. The Boone boys are gone, as you know, and Deaton Thomas Jr.'s got a chance, if UNLV has a great year, much like Clifford over at Colorado State, to be the player of the year in the league. He had a lot of options to go to other schools or even pro options. So, we'll see how UNLV does, but with Kruger and some of these strange losses, it's kind of like I'll believe it when I see it. And if they finish top 5, I don't think it's a huge surprise. So with that being said, I do think San Jose State's the team to watch. 2 years ago, they did finish 5th and get to the MWC semifinals, which shook everybody to its core. I don't think San Jose State had ever been higher than a 9 seed in the history of the Mountain West. And then they get a 5 seed that year. Of course, a giant step backwards. I think, just knowing the program extremely well and getting a chance to spend about 20 minutes with Tim Miles last week. Rob Viola going down last year set the tone for just a rough patchwork season. He went down with a fractured leg. I think it was 2 weeks before the season started. He's completely recovered from that. Miles is expecting a double-double every night. Those are his words. And so I'm excited to see Viola. I think with, the challenge for the Spartans on the front court side is DeYoung's got he had some nice minutes last year, 7-footer, plays really good defense, rebounds pretty well, and he's obviously a problem in the rim protection. But he's got plantar tendonitis, and he might be out as long as January or longer. They're meeting with medical staff this week to figure out his prognosis. And I also think, if he's gone, then you're going to be really, really dependent on some mysteries like, they got the Seton Hall transfer. I don't want to butcher his name, but Nga, and you've got a few other pieces you can plug in. Joel Mariel, he's been around the block a long time out here in the Oregon State was his last stop, 7'2", but he's just kind of like one of those guys plugging him in for 10 to 15. You don't want to depend on him. Outside of that, the reason I'm mentioning the Spartans is Will McClendon's a super talented guy from UCLA. Yes. Donovan Yap was a great sniper down at Fresno. He'll play well in the league. Hall's the one I'm really the most curious about coming from the WAC up to the Mountain West. He was a nice WAC player for Stephen F. Austin. And Uduje is going to be great from Utah State. He knows the league. So
Uduje was good last year.
He was very good. Yeah. And so I think they're not the deepest team, but the 5 on the floor, if they can stick together and stay healthy, they're gonna knock some teams off.
I'm with you on UNLV. I'm with you on San Jose State because McClendon, Uduje, it's a good duo that they have there. I'm interested by Wyoming mainly just because I like Sundance Wicks a lot.
Oh yeah, and they're old, very old team.
But that roster is not very good. I would say.
Yeah, we'll see what the kid from Fort Lewis might surprise you, but that's who I'm looking forward to seeing.
I think this Fresno State team is probably going to be pretty bad. I am fascinated by Amar Aguilar, the JUCO National Player of the Year, but really outside of that, like this could be. I didn't like the Vance Wahlberg hire. Jonathan and I were talking about this. The guy went 14-35 17 years ago at Pepperdine. Has been an NBA assistant and a high school coach since then. Has not worked in college basketball since 2008. And now he comes in. I don't like the hire, and I don't like the team. I like Aguilar. That's about it. Shout out Morsek.
If you guys aren't familiar, the story behind Wahlberg, he's a local legend. He's a favorite of the Valley, the area they call where Fresno's in. Valley. Yeah, the Central Valley, exactly. So he, if he can just get a little bit of a spark going, he's going to be very well loved and adored and supported. The problem is like you said, like in this league, he's starting from the very bottom, and he's got a lot of suspect pieces that we don't really know much about. Probably too much to hope for, but he was a legend at Fresno City College, and of course Clovis West High School is a premier local high school there in Fresno.
He would be an interesting hire at like Cal Poly.
Maybe.
And honestly,
I would say Stanislaus State, but I don't want to.
Okay, yeah, like I was gonna say like name your favorite California D2, but like
in the Valley, yeah, there you gotta go Stanislaus.
Yeah. Obviously, Cal Poly's not in the Valley, but like I'm just saying, like he would be an interesting hire, like somewhere like that, like a place where where the league maybe isn't as grueling as this one, and maybe one where you'd have a little bit of time to kind of build things up. I just don't really like this Fresno State roster. And Air Force, they're good. They're Air Force. Joe Scott is a really underrated coach. He's really smart.
He works his ass off.
I
talked to Joe.
Country relative to conference. Shout out Ethan Taylor though. That dude's a beast.
Yeah, just pay attention to the teams Air Force is playing because they're going to knock some teams off. He told me that this is the most mature and stable team he's had ever entering a season before. He's got player run like offenses. Ethan Taylor is basically an assistant coach on the court. Now again, the athleticism and the skill level is limited, but they're going to play smart. They're not going to beat themselves. And sometimes when, depending on who the opponent is, that might be enough to get the W.
Yeah. Kind of intrigued by a couple of these teams. I do think that, Air Force will ultimately be Air Force. That's like one of the toughest jobs in the country, given the circumstances and the conference they have to play in. UNLV without the Boons, I think their defense will probably take a step back. It's really tough to replace those two and what they did for that team. But, Kruger might have the best player in the conference this year in Deaton Thomas. I think it's really important for them to keep Jalen Hill healthy. He was really good, I thought, a couple of years ago at Oklahoma and just had some really bad injury luck the last couple of years. But if he's healthy, I think he could be a really good player in this league. San Jose State, Tim Miles does a good job. It's another school that it's a tough job, but they have some real talent this year compared to what they normally have. Last year was was sort of a rebuilding year after finishing top 100 in Ken Pom and losing Omari Moore. And then, like Sam kind of said it, like Wyoming, we love Sundance Wicks here. I wouldn't be surprised if they win some games they're not supposed to, but this roster is a little suspect. And then they lost 2 players to Drake who had the best on-off numbers on the team last year. It would have been really key if they kept even one of those guys. That's Cam Menyahu and Cale Combs now in the Missouri Valley. And then, yeah, like I think that's all we got for the Mountain West. Anything to add before we get on to the WCC?
I'll go with 3 bids total. I flipped. I ended up with Nevada as the 3rd, but I was so close with them in New Mexico, and I feel a lot more secure about Boise and San Diego State. But like we said, any of those top 6 probably are interchangeable 3 through 6.
I think Nevada's a clear 6. For me, I like San Diego State to be a tournament team, probably, just given how good Brian Dutcher is. Boise State to probably be a tournament team. And then I'm honestly not certain, but I think New Mexico to be a tournament team. I think
You're muted again, Sam.
probably a 3-bid. How much did you hear?
Most
Just
of it.
repeat what you were going to say.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so I think Nevada's a clear 6. I think Utah State and Colorado State are a clear 4-5. New Mexico is probably a clear 3, and they're probably a tournament bubble team. And then just based on coaching, I think Boise State and San Diego State get there.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if it's a 2-bid league. I would not be surprised if it's a 4-bid league. I think 5 would be a little bit more surprising for me. Jonathan, what's your take on how many bids the Mountain West gets?
Yeah, I'll go 4 here. I don't have 4 teams ranked as tournament teams in like my preseason rankings, but there's enough quality wins in this league that I think you get enough to get 4. I'll say San Diego State and Boise State are for sure in. I'll go New Mexico as my 3rd, and then I'll say Utah State surprises some people again and gets that 4th, but would not be surprised if Colorado State or Nevada got in. I wouldn't even really be that surprised if UNLV got in. You got Kevin Kruger, like kind of really needs a good year there, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's just coaching his ass off this year. Let's get to the WCC, our second of 3 mid-major leagues we'll get to on this podcast. This is another league that's kind of going through some turmoil. Whoa, Sam kind of changed the format on me, but
I'm just thinking maybe this looks better in our new vertical video format on TikTok and Instagram. Go ahead and follow Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers on Instagram and on TikTok at BBBCBB Podcast. And if you're not already following Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers on Twitter, you are missing all of our live shows. So go ahead and follow Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers on Twitter. You can go ahead and follow us on Twitch as well. Nobody watches us there, but we do stream on Twitch. We also stream on YouTube, where also nobody watches us. 98% of our traffic comes from YouTube. Sorry, from Twitter. And that's fine. That's fine. But
hey,
Twitter,
2%. It's not nothing.
2%. And for let's see, how many people today? For the one person that has tuned in on Instagram, for the one person that has tuned in on YouTube and the one person that has tuned in on Twitch today, we thank you. We support you. You support us. And go ahead and follow us on Instagram and on TikTok. I'll show you right now that we have a brand new Instagram feed. And if you follow right now, you can be one of the first 41 followers of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers.
Yeah, we're going to try to do a better job this year, just clipping stuff from the shows and posting it to get the content out there with little bits and takes from us. let's get into the WCC here. Gonzaga, obviously, only 2 years left in the league. They'll take the criticism every year of playing in a fake league, if you will, but the WCC is far from it. This is a Gonzaga team that is going through injury turmoil to start the season. It is a team that is still has a tremendous roster, and they're gonna play some new teams that we'll get into eventually here in our WCC talk. But let's start with the Zags here. No Steel Venters again this season. He is injured, out for the season, but still plenty to be excited about with the returners. That's Ryan Nemhard, Nolan Hickman, Graham Ike, Ben Gregg, Braden Huff, Dusty Stromer, and a couple more. And then they bring in Khalif Battle, has been at a couple different stops, but a big-time scorer nonetheless. And then Michael Ajayi. Stam, I'll start with you for the Zags. Are they still a national championship contender without Steel Venters? And who do they turn to with Venters sidelined again for the season?
I think Dusty Stromer steps into the starting lineup. Unless they want to do that thing again. If they want to do that thing again, where they put Ben Gregg off the bench and they start Ike at the 5, which I think is best for them. I think Gregg is really good as like a change of pace guy. So I think that's what they should be doing. Then it'll be Dusty Stromer stepping into the starting lineup. Maybe Khalif Battle, but I think what Khalif Battle is here to do is come in, lead the second unit when Ryan Nemhard comes off the floor. Because Ryan Nemhard did not come off the floor last year. He played like 37 minutes a game. It was wild. We talked about this on our Gonzaga preview with Josh Link, who does an awesome job covering the Zags. His team isn't as deep as we thought they would be if they had Steel Venters, but I still think there's enough there in that starting lineup if they hit and if Battle hits to lead that second unit, and if Ben Gregg is good, and if Braden Huff takes a step forward to be a fringe national title contender.
Rocco? Go for it.
Yeah, no doubt. I actually think this is a much brighter scope than anything we saw last year. Last year they were basically getting by with 7 guys the whole time, and by the end of the year they knocked off 2 blue bloods that changed the course of their season. Obviously, the first win at Rupp Arena took them from a potential bubble out team to a weigh-in team, which was a dramatic bracketology turn in February that many of us haven't seen really ever. But from that point forward, they go on and win every game until the West Coast Conference championship game against St. Mary's, where they had a little bit of a hiccup. But from there, they totally dominated both McNeese and Kansas before finally running out of gas after a really good first half against Purdue. So they have so much to build on and so much of that core back. And now instead of being 70, despite no Venters, they're going to be 90. And, you bring in the Tarleton kid to play some elite stopping defense. Emmanuel Innocenti, he was amazing to watch in the WAC last year. Obviously not going to be playing 31 minutes here for the Zags, but he's still young. He was Tarleton's lockdown defender as a freshman. So that's just an extra depth piece. Khalif Battle has been around the block. He's played on winning teams. And Michael Ajayi, for anybody that didn't watch Pepperdine last year, second best defensive rebounder in the league. He's going to actually be more of an extra bowl in the paint with Ike. And they actually kind of needed that physicality last year. I think he's a perfect plug-in. So now you could go with a lineup of Nemhard, Hickman, Ajayi, Gregg, and Ike all on the floor together against bigger teams. And then, of course, you can do 4-guard lineups all the way down to Battle and Stromer together. And I do think Battle's going to be a lot more than just a fill-in for Nemhard. Nemhard, I still expect to play a heavy amount of minutes, but Battle can play 1 through 3. And based on the matchup and based on how things go, like every time Gonzaga plays St. Mary's, it's a total chess match. And those matchups play out a little bit differently every time, depending on who gets that 10-point lead early and who doesn't. And so this is just going to give Mark Few a few more tools in his tool belt as they get into those February, March wars. The rest of the season will just be feeling that out. But I think they are by far, in my opinion, the best team in the battle for Atlantis. I expect them to win that tournament, go 3-0. I think their two potential losses in non-league are the UConn game in Madison Square Garden and the San Diego State road game. I just never, you can never pencil in a win at a venue like that. But otherwise, I think they can run the table in non-league, which is a lot of big wins. They get Baylor in Spokane. They get Kentucky in Seattle. Those are going to be just totally pro-Zeg crowds, and it's going to be really difficult for both the Bears and the Wildcats to get those wins. And then in league play, you look at their January schedule, you can't even imagine them losing any of those games. So they're going to roll into February possibly and almost probably with only 2 losses. And I think by the time they get to the finish line, they're looking at maybe 4, but maybe even a better record than that. So I've got the Zags as a 1 seed in the West.
Yeah, I think this is a team that still has really high potential. I think they're going to be more physical than they were a year ago. They're obviously super fun to watch with the pace of play that they always play at. They were a little slower last year than I feel like they typically are, but Ryan Nembhard, Nolan Hickman, both really good players. Hickman, an elite shooter, Nembhard, an elite playmaker. And then, I think adding Inacetti, just adding the depth you did means that maybe you don't have to rely on the younger guys as much as you did last year. Like Braden Huff was probably playing a little more than they wanted him to last year. Great offensive player, but still ways away from being a defender that Gonzaga wants. And then obviously like Graham Ike probably should have won the conference player of the year last year that went to Marshallonis. This is just a super intriguing roster. I would bet on
Jonathan Mobo should have won conference player of the year.
I
will stay on that until the day I will die on that hill. I will die on the hill. But Jonathan Mobo deserved WCC player of the year.
Khalif Battle was a guy that hasn't really done a lot of winning in his college career, but Gonzaga seems to be able to get the best out of everyone, and I don't mind him in this off the bench scoring role, similar to kind of how they used Ryan Woolridge back in 2020. He was Woolridge was a better passer, but he gave them legitimate scoring juice off the bench that I don't really feel like Gonzaga had last year, and I think Battle is a really important piece for this team. Let's go on to St. Mary's here, who I have at number 2. This is a team that won the league last year, both in the regular season and the conference tournament. I kind of at the end of the year last year, I kind of really thought that Gonzaga, just the way they were rolling, was going to just kind of roll over St. Mary's the same way they did at the end of the regular season, but that was not the case. St. Mary's bounced back. Unfortunately, they fell in the NCAA tournament to Grand Canyon, a team that just provided a little too much athleticism for them. St. Mary's here is going to lose Aiden Mahaney, Josh Jefferson. Those two are both on to national contenders, but you do return the player of the year in Marshallonis. Jordan Ross played for you as a freshman last year. Mitchell Saxon, one of the best big men in the country on a yearly basis at this point. Luke Barrett is back. And then you have some interesting younger players like Mikey Lewis, Josh Dent. You get Paulius Morauskas, so another Arizona transfer that was kind of buried there. Rocco, what is the expectation for the Gales this year? Is this a team that we should just kind of blindly bet on Randy Bennett figuring the pieces out? Because this roster does seem like it's substantially worse than what they've had the last couple of years.
Well, obviously losing Jefferson and Mahaney is difficult, and they were key players. But there were some games last year where Mahaney could not hit anything to save his life. He had a couple games where he started, I think, 0 for 10 or 0 for 12, and it got to a point where he was a negative player on a couple of nights. And of course, besides that, Mahaney was tremendous. But I think when you plug in a Jordan Ross, who, by the way, all the practice reports are raving about. He's got a ton of skill development. Randy's not a guy. Randy's an old school guy. He doesn't play freshmen usually. So Jordan Ross has paid his dues. He would have had a quandary this year on how to break up Ross Mahaney minutes. And obviously, the NIL and all that Mahaney got to go to UConn. It kind of just made the decision easy for him to move on. But you get leadership like Luke Barrett, Mitchell Saxon, and Augustus. And by the way, Augustus is the defending player of the year. And I know I appreciate I appreciate the defense of my boy Mogbo, but Augustus was just phenomenal the last month of the season. And by the way, guess who the only team in the country last year to go undefeated in true road games was? That would be the St. Mary's Gales, who did win
It was. That is correct. And
they won it. They won at the Kennel, which pretty much nobody does. So this team's got a lot of leadership.
They won at Utah as well.
And they, yes, they did. Well,
no, they didn't.
They lost at home to Utah. They go to Utah this year.
They won at Colorado State. That was the one they won.
Yes, they did. And they had a lot of other good road wins too. Of course, the rest of the WCC, and I think the thing that people that don't get to follow this team as closely don't realize is they are the most over-prepared team I've followed, for years. They are up till 3-4 in the morning, breaking down every other opponent player, what their strengths is, and they just focus and lock in on every opponent. As a San Francisco area guy, I'm at the St. Mary's San Francisco game typically every time they play. And I can't tell you how many times the game's over in the first 10 minutes because they are so well prepared and they build up like a 28-10 run to start the game. And San Francisco doesn't know what to do. They've done that to Santa Clara a few times as well. Really good teams. They will handcuff you if you're not ready for them. The teams they struggle with, as Grand Canyon exposed in the first round last year, are those ultra athletic teams. You don't get as many of those here in the WCC, but that will be interesting because I do think a team like Washington State, who we'll talk about in a minute, and some other new faces in the league might create some challenges for the Gales.
Yeah, the one game I'd look at on their schedule early and say this is going to be a challenge for them is Boise State, and USC. Those are two teams with a lot of athleticism, and I think this St. Mary's team is going to have the same problems as always. I think Morauskas is going to be pretty good. Love Jordan Ross. He's going to be very good. But I said, this is what I wrote. I wrote it's uncomfortable to rank St. Mary's as like a 50s-ish team, but I felt like I had to do it because this roster just doesn't have the pieces that we've seen it have over the last few years. When you lose Aiden Mahaney and Josh Jefferson, who were arguably the two best players on this team last year, you get into a really difficult spot. And I thought Josh Jefferson was kind of the guy who made the biggest impact on winning for St. Mary's. So losing him was a big deal, a huge deal. And I just think that St. Mary's has a lot of those swing games in the non-conference this year. I mentioned Boise State. I mentioned USC, Utah, Nebraska, Towson. They can't, like, the good mid-majors too. Towson, Chattanooga, Akron, Utah State. They lost most of those games last year. Like, they beat Colorado State and they beat New Mexico. That kind of saved their season. They can't really afford to lose those games like this year. I know they got a 5 seed, but I don't think they can bank on. I don't think they should want to bank on that again.
Yeah, and I think
I thought they got pretty drastically overseeded last year. I thought they should have been like an 8 or a 9.
Yeah, the rise of Gonzaga obviously helped because they had the road win at Gonzaga at the top of their profile. And, of course, the rise of Colorado State helped as well with that big road win. And they're very, very skilled. And, of course, I'm a consultant there as well at scheduling teams that are picked at the very top or top 2 or 3 in mid-major leagues. So, of course, this year you see them open with Towson picked to win the CAA. You see them have Akron in week 2. There's a bunch of more games like that at home. And those are the types of teams they can bring in to Moraga and beat by 25, and that will keep their net in the top 20 all year. Just one of those hidden things they're willing to do, but they have the money to do it. And, I think the one thing is like I would have had the exact same thought the day that Jefferson got hurt. I thought they were in a lot of trouble. But the reality is they went 7-2 after that, including the tournament loss to Grand Canyon. The only losses were to Grand Canyon and Gonzaga. By the way, in those 7 wins, they beat San Francisco, Santa Clara, and Gonzaga again. So I'm just telling you, this is a program, and even if it doesn't look sexy, they find ways to win.
Exactly, yeah. And that's my thing. Like, they're going to find a way into the NCAA tournament. They're going to find a way to be a single-digit seed.
Yep.
I don't know what that way is going to look like right now. Just no.
Ross.
Not a clue.
Jordan Ross. I'm telling you, Jordan Ross is the guy.
Don't do the I'm telling you about Jordan Ross. I was the Jordan Ross guy last summer.
Let's do it.
I acted like I discovered him. I had him as like a top 20 recruit. So I was disappointed when he didn't play.
I think he might prove you right this year. So
okay, if that happens, that will be really exciting, and St. Mary's will be really good.
Yes,
very excited to do the guess the score game once conference play starts, where I'm sitting here and Sam is making me guess the first half scores when St. Mary's is playing some of these bottom teams in the WCC, because their style just makes it so those games get really, really ugly.
Yes.
Well, I think there's one team that isn't that the games aren't going to be quite as ugly anymore, because we'll talk about how much I like their new head coach. But
yeah, we will get there. Let's go to San Francisco, and obviously, Rocco, you're very familiar with this program and this team. Am I like kind of underestimating the loss of Mobo when I say that like I think this team is like a top 65-ish team in the preseason?
I think the top 65 conclusion is probably about right, somewhere in that range. But the Mobo thing is interesting because obviously he's a pro. He's on the Toronto Raptors roster at this point, and well-deserved. I mean, he was dominant in most games. My only major concern with him was when they played Gonzaga and St. Mary's, which is when all the chips are on the table for the Dons. They got to find a way. They get 4 cracks at those 2 teams, maybe 5 if they get them in the tournament, which they probably will. And in each of those matchups, Mark Few and Randy Bennett are masters. They found ways to get into his head, and he didn't make that next adjustment. And the Dons really needed that. And it wasn't only him. It was guys like Mongolian Mike as well, and a few other guys that they just get really frustrated in those matchups. And if you're following the Dons' entire season like I am, like their season comes down to those games. And, man, it's just frustrating because when they're at their peak, they're a really fun team to watch. They can roll teams. They are a top 60 level. But for them to get over the hump, they really got to find a way to get 1 or 2 of those wins to make their resume more interesting. But as we go into this year, the guy that they're really looking at is Carlton Lingard Jr., obviously 7 foot, so much taller than Mogo, but he's got the same kind of rangy athleticism. He even has the same braids, and he plays super physical, transfer from UTSA. He looked good in the practice I saw him. He is already well integrated. He got into San Francisco in late June, so he's already been around for 4 or 5 months. You got Chips Newberry next to him, who's an amazing leader on the front line, does a little bit of everything, defense, can shoot it a little bit. Shot 40% from three actually last year in a limited sample. And I think everybody knows how lethal the Dons guards are, with the big 3 of Ryan Beasley, Marcus Williams being the leader, and then Malik Thomas is a microwave. So love the guards. And then you have Beasley's brother Robbie back. Issa Silva, we'll see what he can do. But I think they are depending quite a bit more on the Vandy transfer, Jason Rivera Torres, who had a decent role with Stackhouse, now jumping into his sophomore year, got a decent amount of NIL to come to San Francisco. So they've got good depth. I think a lot of it rides on Lingard to be a major producer at the 5.
Can I talk about Noedo Newberry?
Yeah, Chips. We call him Chips.
Okay. Can I talk about him?
Always.
Go for it.
I sent Jonathan a text back a while ago. Let me find it. And by the way, Jonathan, you're supposed to say we can always supposed to do the draft.
Bad.
Yes. Let me just find this text. New. Here it is.
We're doing a live search on the air. I like it.
Yeah, this is not the first time that we've done this. This is actually a pretty frequent thing.
I like it.
6'8", 235, 5.2 block rate, 1.7 steal rate, 42 made threes, 41%, 78 made twos, 63%. Only player in the country, 6'8" or taller, with that volume and efficiency from inside and outside and a block rate over 3.5 is Chips Newberry. Pretty good, huh?
It's amazing. But here's the problem, Sam. He fouled out of 5 games, and he had a bunch of games with 4 fouls. So that's why his minutes are so low. He's got to get better at the fouling.
And you get another year. You get another offseason. I think
he looks good. He looks good.
I think that there's a chance that he could be a second team guy in the WCC this year if he stays out of foul trouble. I think Carlton Lingard can be a first team guy in the WCC.
That'd be big.
Either guy in this backcourt can be a first or second teamer. Jason Rivera Torres. I think there's 5 guys on this team that could legitimately be all conference.
Yeah.
And that's not even talking about Ryan Beasley, who I know Jonathan is a huge fan of. I think that this is a really good basketball team. I think I'm higher on them than Jonathan is.
They're good.
I've been high on San Francisco for a while. I don't think anybody thought what was going to happen with Mobo happened with Mobo. Anybody thought what happened with Mobo was going to happen with Mobo?
Gurlison said the same thing, by the way.
Yeah, so that's
that
kind of makes me think that hey, if he did that with Mobo, who nobody thought this could happen with, what could he do with Lingard, who is obviously a freak athlete?
Yeah, I do like Ryan Beasley a lot. I still expect him as a sophomore to come off the bench here. San Francisco's guards in Williams and Thomas are pretty reliable, so I would expect those two to stay the starters. But Beasley was playing a lot down the stretch last year, and he had some real flashes where I thought, this kid can be a future all-conference guy. And then let's get into my 4th team, Santa Clara. Herb Sendek always does a phenomenal job with the internal development. Adama Ball was such an obvious breakout guy, and that's exactly what he was. They get back Carlos Stewart, he was a Marfo transfer. Tyree Bryan's back, Johnny O'Neill's back, Christoph Tilley's back. This team returns a lot. My question for them is what are they going to get out of their bench? And Rocco, I'll start with you to address that.
Well, I think the bench is still fairly solid. A lot of the same faces when you look at Brenton Napper and Jake Ensminger, and you've got Cameron Tung still there and Christian Hammond still there. And then they add in a JUCO transfer with all upside, Elijah Mahi. We'll see if his game converts, but he was a 17 and a half, 6.6 rebound, 4.5 assists, did everything for West Valley Junior College. And, there's actually a couple good freshmen that have raw potential between Alan Graves and Bucky Oboye. I saw Oboye, he redshirted last year, man. He's bouncy, 7'1". So who knows? But I think the first few bench guys I listed between Napper, Ensminger, Hammond, and Tong, they're pretty deep, actually. I think what they prefer to play, though, is the guys who are proven. Johnny O'Neill was tremendous at American, carried that forward, and he's certainly capable of being a quality WCC player, as he showed last year. Now going to be a senior year. Christoph Tilley, got to stay out of foul trouble, got to be a little bit better conditioned, in my opinion. But again, having a couple 7-footers, if a Boye is a factor, gives Sendex so many different options, both defensively and matchup situationally. Obviously, we all know Adama Alpha Ball, who legally did change his name, is a pro for all intents and purposes, made the game-winning bucket against Gonzaga. This team also beat St. Mary's once last year. So they've done the thing that San Francisco can't do, is beat one of those two teams or both. But they've got to be a little bit more consistent, not slip up against teams like San Diego. The thing I love is that I think out of the entire WCC, nobody's scheduled more aggressively. In terms of the quantity of strategic games, you can count them up. But Santa Clara has 9. I think a couple other teams have 8. And if Santa Clara can go 6-3 in those strategic games, and what I mean by that is not a bye game where you're just analytical win at home. These are either power conference opponents, neutral court games, or road games. This team's going to McNeese this year. That's a huge deal. They're also going to Nevada, which will be a big opportunity. So if they go 6-3 and then they can sprinkle in 1 or 2 Gonzaga/St. Mary's games, that could be enough just based on their schedule. They're going to be one of the top strength of schedules in the entire country for non-conference to stay interesting to the committee all year.
You kind of hit on everything I wanted to. I think Brenton Napper is really good off the bench for them. And Jake,
if he's not starting fights,
yeah. And then there's Adama Alpha Ball, as you said, came in from Arizona, and we knew what Santa Clara had did with Pajimski, with Jalen Williams, Herb Sendek, one of the best talent developing staffs in the country. Scott Garson's there. Oh man, I forgot the other names that are on that.
Jason Ludwig.
Jason Ludwig. Yeah, that was the other name that I was looking for. It's just a great staff. Also, Scott Garson was great at the College of Idaho. Now Colby Blaine is awesome at the College of Idaho. I mentioned the College of Idaho.
Scott Garson is just awesome at life.
Yeah,
I hope he's watching.
I mentioned the College of Idaho on a preseason stream. Shout out Tyler Weiss and Jackson Powers from the state of Idaho. Anyway, Johnny O'Neill, we know what he can do. Hopefully he has not a bounce back year, but like a better year, because I think he looked a little bit uncomfortable moving in from the Patriot League, where now he finds athletes that can match up with him. Tyree Bryan, another guy that I think can have a good year, and Carlos Stewart, so familiar with the system from what he was doing previously before he left. Now I think he'll be in a good spot to step back in and be their starting point guard. I love Jalen Benjamin. I think he's fun, but he was not good for this team. He was a negative, I would say, after being awesome at Mount St. Mary's, one of my favorite players in the MAC that year. But he was a negative last year for Santa Clara.
Yeah, he was.
I think getting a huge net positive back in Carlos Stewart is going to reshape this team's season, and it's going to help bring their floor back up.
Yeah, Santa Clara will pretty much almost get us started in this college basketball regular season. They have the second Division I versus Division I tip-off of the season against St. Louis in the Field of 68 Classic. So very excited for that one. Those are two really good mid-major programs. St. Louis obviously getting their program back on track with the hire of Josh Schertz. We'll get into them tomorrow. Let's turn to Wazoo here. This is a team first year in the WCC, kind of got left out of conference realignment, but they found their home, at least from a basketball standpoint. And it's a new era with Kyle Smith moving on to Stanford. They bring in David Riley, who was from that side of the state at Eastern Washington, ran a really good program there. Yeah, shout out David, who was on this podcast back in March. Was it, Sam? Like early March?
It was right before the unfortunate end of the season in the Big Sky tournament.
Yeah. But yeah, Riley brings some guys over with him from Eastern Washington, Cedric Coward, Ethan Price. Is Price the one on a mission trip, or is somebody on their team's going on a mission trip, right?
Yes.
It's Casey Jones.
Okay. Right. Okay. So yeah, they'll get Jones. They'll get Jones
by the way,
back.
not only going on a mission trip, but then taking the year after the mission trip to rehab and get back into shape.
Yeah.
So he will be out of college basketball for 3 full years when he makes when he comes in for his COVID year.
They will get him back eventually, we think. But they do bring along
if he
Howard.
doesn't die on his mission trip, then he will be back.
Jesus. Eastern Washington, though, was phenomenal for the last couple years with Riley leading the program. They bring along a couple guys, a couple other guys as well, including Eric Strupp, Lawan Watts, and then they get back Isaiah Watts. They got some intriguing freshmen here. Nate Calmise comes over. He was great 2 years ago. He was the freshman of the year.
They keep missing.
Nate Calmise was the freshman of the year in the Southland a couple years ago.
Sorry,
Rocco?
the Celtics have 29 threes, and they're just missing a whole bunch. The NBA record is 29.
Rocco, what are the expectations for Washington State in year one in this league?
Well, I think it's an interesting time. I think people locally are probably wait and see with Riley. Obviously, Eastern Washington's only an hour and 40 minutes away to the north. And, so they probably have a good understanding of what he was able to accomplish at EWU. And, of course, quickly catching up if they didn't with all these EWU transfers coming in. But Coach Riley has more energy than probably any coach not only in the WCC, but in the country. And he's a tireless worker. They're constantly working hard on whether it's their roster, their schedule, their defense, their offense. He's just eat, sleep, breathe basketball guy, which is why he still is one of the youngest head coaches in the country. And already, he's on his way to basically a Power 5 job. He's at a Power 5 school here. And I think, that's the interesting thing about Washington State and Oregon State, for that matter, is they're joining a private school Jesuit mostly based school league with these tiny gyms, and they're going to have these big, huge arenas rocking in small towns like Pullman and Corvallis, which is going to create a whole different feel to the league. You can certainly see, even in Oregon State's case, we'll get to them in a minute, but they would knock off teams like Arizona and USC at home regularly. So you can imagine Gonzaga and St. Mary's maybe getting snake bit in these places as well. And on top of that, Washington State's a team I think is pretty dangerous roster-wise. Cal Meese was a player at Washington last year. I think he was ready to shine and got caught up in a mix of a bunch of guys that got added in for NIL purposes, whether you want to look at Severe Wheeler or Mulcahy or whoever you want from that team. It was just a bunch of misfit toys in the end. But Cal Meese could really play. When he was on the floor, I was really impressed. I think he's going to shine in this team. I think the one thing I actually like about this team is their rotation's kind of almost set. There's 7 guys with experience and then some inexperienced freshmen, redshirt freshmen that they don't really need to count on. So it's all upside. But I like this first 7. And Watts, I think, is better than advertised. He was playing second fiddle last year, but I think he's ready to emerge. Heard good things on the scrimmage. Apparently they beat Colorado State by double digits in that game, for whatever that's worth. But Coward's a scorer, as you know, and Ethan Price is a scorer and a rebounder. So it's going to be I think it's going to be a pretty good team and a chance to really upend Santa Clara or San Francisco to get up to third.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. You kind of covered it all. I'd like David Riley. I think his offense is really good. Go back, listen to that podcast that we did with him, because he kind of explained his principles, and I think he's just a really smart guy, one of the smartest young coaches in the sport, and I'm really excited to watch him at Washington State. Also, the really interesting about him is when I texted him, congrats on getting the Washington State job, he didn't respond for a while because he was probably really busy. But
and getting a bunch of other texts.
Yeah. 2 weeks later, probably scrolling through 500 texts, 500 different people that he was texting just to get to me. He thanked me for the congratulations 2 weeks later. So it's not that he forgot, it's that he was going through and making sure that he was seeing everybody's messages, because I remember saying to Jonathan, do you know how many people you have to deal with when you take a new head coaching job?
Your mic went out again. I do not know what's going on today with you.
It's administration at both schools. There's players at both schools. Transfer portal at both schools. There's recruits at both schools. It's real estate agents. It's family. It's friends. It's literally he could have texted 550 people in just those 2 weeks, and then he still made an effort to scroll all the way down and make sure that he got back to everybody. And that's kind of the mark of what I see, how I see David Riley being an awesome head coach down the road.
So the last team I really want to get into in sort of full detail here, before we kind of open this up to discuss the general league as a big picture and maybe some tidbits on other teams, is Loyola Marymount. This is a team that has a ton of talent, in my opinion. The talent is probably maybe third in the league behind Mary's and Gonzaga. But there's a lot of questions here about roster continuity. Javon Porter had some offseason troubles, but it's pretty undeniable that this is a group with a tremendous amount of talent. So, Rocco, I'll start with you. What do you think of this Loyola Marymount team, and what do they have to do to maximize their ceiling?
Well, you're not wrong. You could argue they have the third most talented roster. There's certainly no way to win or settle the argument, but there's so much talent, as you said. I think you have to talk about the Loyola Marymount program first, and about what happened last spring, and that was Stan Johnson on his own firing his entire assistant coaching staff and bringing in Lorenzo Romar and some other kind of legendary coaches to fill the bench and help with recruiting. That helped them land guys like Diop from Nebraska, Vide from UCLA, and of course Porter from Pepperdine was clearly Romar's guy. In fact, I think they're related. So that was very interesting. But I have that gave me an uneasy feeling in my stomach just about the big picture. I know some of the guys that got let go from that experience, and we'll see. I mean, it's a lot of change, and clearly on the surface, it looked like it was an administration driven thing. Like, hey, Stan, you're either gone or you can fire your assistants. But it turns out that's not the case. It was all Stan's decision to just completely pivot in a new direction. So, if he does have more than this year to work with, they should be able to breathe easy, coach these guys up, and maximize the talent. But my feeling is the pressure is really on to win. And when I've seen that in years past, more often than not, that can and will maybe break the program throughout the year at some point. So that's my biggest thing about LMU coming in. Now, I could easily be wrong. Last year, Chris Collins at Northwestern had the same thing, got to the tournament. Somehow, Kevin Keats at NC State, same thing, got into the tournament. Those guys were going to lose their job. So maybe Stan does something similar. And I don't think they expect him to make the tournament either. I think an NIT is good enough here. And I'll get into the roster now. Like MJ Amy is a guy I really enjoyed watching play at San Jose State. He can clearly fill it up. He's a leader. He's a bucket getter when you need it. You still have Will Johnson there. You have, the hardest name to pronounce in the league with Alex Merkviladze. I get, and Stan gives me a lot of crap for that, but he's a tough name to pronounce. But he plays well, and he's a really key player for what they do, rebounding, shooting, and probably their best defender. Isanza's a 7-1, plug guy for 10 to 15 minutes a game. And a very intriguing guy, Jan Vide, who barely got to play at UCLA, making that European transition. He's now had a year in the U.S. He didn't have to leave LA. He's still there. And in a lower league, maybe he can actually break out as a sophomore.
Yeah. You mentioned Jan Vide. I thought Jan Vide was a top 10 recruit last year. I was wrong. I was very wrong. And I still think I'm going to be wrong on that. But I think Jan Vide has the potential to be a really good player. He's really fluid off the dribble. He can score. He can shoot. I think he has a chance. I think he is one of many players on this roster that had the chance to be like a double-digit 15-point scorer at some point. Maybe not this year for him. He's just a sophomore, but I think eventually he will be an all-conference player, whether it's in the WCC or somewhere else.
Yeah, really nothing else to add from me, like that I didn't already say or that you guys didn't already say. Like if this team can figure it out and they play together and they're coached well, like could have a tremendous amount of success. But it's kind of for me, I'll believe it when I see it. Like Porter obviously had a pretty good year on the court at Pepperdine last year, and then Amy was sort of similar situation, was really good last year as well. But if these pieces come together, this could be a team to watch for sure. Anything else about the WCC that we want to get into? We obviously have Oregon State new to the league as well. Sam, I know there's a coach that you want to talk, a coach in a program that you want to talk about. So we'll start with you here.
Rocco, guess what I'm going to talk about?
Dave Smart, obviously.
Dave Smart, yeah. This is
it's a no-brainer.
This is a Dave Smart Stan podcast. We are the biggest Dave Smart fans maybe anywhere, aside from everywhere, because everybody's a Dave Smart fan. Every coach that played against his teams in Canada said that it was the most challenging thing to prepare for, the most challenging thing to play against. They would whip ass against all of these Division I teams because they have such a unique defense. Grant McCaslin brought into Texas Tech, and he did an awesome job helping out there. And he is going to be a stud assistant coach. Not stud assistant, stud head coach in one of the country's most difficult jobs. I don't know if he's going to make the tournament there. I would bet that he doesn't. But he's going to get this team out of the basement eventually and make the Pacific one of the hardest teams to play against in the WCC.
Man, that's tremendous, and I don't want to compete with you. And I don't have my own podcast, so you guys should be number one podcast for Dave Smart. So we'll give you
be the number one podcast for Dave Smart.
And I'm a guest on here, so I got your back 100%, fellas. But it was interesting. One of my big goals from WCC Media Day last week was to talk to Dave for a while. I've been working really closely with Clay Wilson, not only at Pacific, but Clay came over from Texas Tech as well, and up-and-coming guy himself, younger guy, works really hard. I thought it was impressive that he wanted to go to Pacific too. And I also got to meet with Pacific's AD last week, which was a very enlightening decision about the whole hiring process. It turns out the AD was trying to figure out who their next coach would be, went to a Texas Tech game unannounced, sat about 8 rows behind the bench. And I think the thing that the AD there told me was, I think on Texas Tech staff last year, technically Dave Smart was like 4th on the bench in terms of pecking order of assistants. You have the associate and you go down the line. And every time Texas Tech during that game, not even sure which game it was, Grant McCaslin had a question for an assistant, he would skip the first 3 coaches and go straight to Dave Smart. And he was the guy that he needed to talk to about what adjustments need to be made. That, as you said, Sam, the defensive guru, there's a really unique system where they basically spend countless hours on their opponent's strengths and weaknesses. And their biggest goal is to take each individual strength away. If you can imagine how many hours that takes game by game to get ready, not only get that in your head, but into your player's head, so you can game plan and take away what that player individually wants to do. He doesn't care if it's a zone. He doesn't care if it's man-to-man. He literally just wants to take away that player's individual preferred way of playing. And if you can do that across 5 guys or even up to 10 guys in certain rotations, it's extremely impressive. And as you said, Sam, the best, extremely frustrating. And that's a way to win games. The last thought on Pacific, and I'm so glad you brought them up, is they do a poll every year. And I found this out behind the scenes, so this is new information. I haven't tweeted it or anything. But they do a poll behind the scenes before the WCC schedule comes out. And it's just for the head coaches to vote. And that's how they base the WC schedule, on who plays each other twice. You miss a team, like Gonzaga is going to play the 2 worst teams just one time to help their metrics, et cetera. You guys get that. In the pecking order, the coaches voted Pacific 6th this year in that scheduling exercise. So that shows you the kind of respect the other 11 coaches in this league have other 10 coaches in this league have for Dave Smart.
Yeah, this is just such an intriguing league from top to bottom. We don't have time to discuss all these teams, but you have Pepperdine with a new coach, Ned Schilling. Oregon State, a first time in the league. They have some intriguing players. Excuse me. Portland, Shante Leggins has gotten a ton of respect, and I really like them taking Max McKinnon, and then San Diego with Steve Lavin still there. This is just going to be a really intriguing league to follow top to bottom all season. And like, somebody's going to have to finish at the bottom of it. Somebody's going to have to finish 10th. Somebody's going to walk away disappointed in this league. But, I think there's a lot of optimism for every team. Go for it, Sam.
I don't like Pepperdine's hire.
Jury's definitely out. Yeah.
I just don't get it. Like, I don't really get it. I just think that was they could have done better. Probably. I think Javon Cooley from Marist, shout out. He's going to hit a lot of shots, play some good defense, but I don't really like that roster all that much.
Hey, I got to meet him last week. Good guy.
Yeah, Javon's good.
Yeah. I would just also, at last thought, I know we've been going on for a while, but I had a good conversation with Wayne Tinkle. Of course, they've been buried in the Pac-12 for a few years, basically since that Elite 8 run. But they have a quintet of sophomores that could all make a leap, if not multiple of them make a leap.
The one name that I'm looking at, wait, hold on. I think Gavin Mars is a name.
Yes, I've heard that as well. And they have some decent returnees. Minor was a big scorer way down at the OVC level at Edwardsville. But I think the thing, like I said earlier with the league, you're playing a team that's been gearing up to compete in the Pac-12, suddenly coming to the WCC. I think it's not a good idea to sleep on Oregon State at this level.
All right. To the Big West we go. This will be the last league we discuss. Probably won't spend as much time on it, but this is still a really good league full of really exciting coaches, really exciting players. Rocco, you know this league way better than Sam and I do, so I'll start with you here. Tell us about some of the storylines and what to watch for in the Big West this year.
Well, I think it starts with Irvine, who, of course, had a great year last year, finishing in the top 100, if not better. I think maybe even top 80 of the net. And, of course, with any Russell Turner coach team, it starts and stops with defense. Last year, he had just a complete bench full of guys that all played. I mean, even into February, they're playing 11 guys. So that's really unique about Russ. Some years he'll do that. This year on paper, it looks like they'll probably go 10 deep to start, and we'll see how they narrow that down. But the big story is getting Bent Lukton back. He was in the portal but came back. I think there's only 2 7-footers in the whole conference. And of course, he's the most dominant one. Doesn't play a lot of minutes, and you'll notice on the roster, nobody played more than really 27 minutes a game because, like I said, they rotate so much, and that I think that makes Irvine really hard to prepare for because they're constantly getting different looks from them, both offense and defensively. Miles Che was a good SoCon player from Chattanooga. He might be a starter. It doesn't really matter if he is or he isn't because, like I said, they're all getting around 20 minutes. Kyle Evans comes over from Colorado State where he was buried on the bench, but at 6'10", he's going to be a nice rotational piece for Russ. But once that defense gets locked in, you still have Devin Tillis and Honemack's a really good player as well, and old. Same with Andre Henry. There's no reason why Irvine in a power ranking situation shouldn't stay at 1. They'll be my regular season champ. But the team that always comes on strong late in the year, actually there's a couple of them, is our guy, Mike Piles, UC Riverside team. Now, again, they're not as deep as Irvine, but they probably have the best guards in the league with Barrington Hargress and Isaiah Moses back. I mean, those guys are just so rock solid. I think they were 2 of the top 4 in the league in assist to turnover ratio. Would not be surprised for the guards, I should say, not all positions. But bringing in, Shoot from Davidson, he's going to help a little bit with the front court. They really like the Cal Poly guy because they didn't have a rim protector last year. Now they do with Joel Armo Trading, I think is how you say it.
What a name.
No. But he's really bouncy. He had a block and a half per game at Cal Poly. Scouted really well. And Parker Strauss, a guy that wasn't going to get on the court soon at Northwestern, is going to help a little bit with their 2-3 position. I just think with those guards, though, Riverside's got a real chance. You see guard play win these types of conference tournaments to finally break through and steal the bid. So watch out for Riverside. I think the other, the top teams this year, in my opinion, are all the UCs. You could argue Santa Barbara's got the most talent, bringing in Colin Smith from Vanderbilt, Kenny Poto, who I covered at Wichita State. Steven Swenson was one of the best players in the A-Sun, averaging 14 a game, very efficient. He was a A-Sun top 5 player, according to Ken Palm last year. And, of course, Deuce Turner from San Diego to go along with Cole Anderson, who played a bunch before. I think what happened with Santa Barbara last year was a little bit of too many cooks in the kitchen and not enough people wanting to play defense. It's a bad combination. So hopefully they've sorted that out. And, we've seen when Santa Barbara clicks what they're capable of. And I think the real program that everybody needs to start paying attention to closer was a team that took the league by storm last year, which was UC San Diego, a younger head coach, and Eric Olin on the rise. He's actually in his mid-40s now, but he's been at UC San Diego for 20 years between being an assistant and now I think almost 10 years as a head coach, both D2. And they're now D1 eligible for the NCAA tournament. They bring in Chris Howell, who played at St. Mary's, Anna Wanya, Tate Jones. He's an all-league guy. He does a little bit. He's a stat sheet stuffer. Even gets over a steal per game. Lot of pieces at UC San Diego. They're deep, and depending on they have 3 different D2 all-stars. You could call them ready to contribute. Depending on how quickly they come along, could go a long ways. But I expect UC San Diego to stay in the top 5.
I agree. UC San Diego is going to be really good, but I want to go back and talk about UC Riverside because this is a UC Riverside podcast at its heart. Right, Jonathan?
It is.
It's Brackets Bubbles and Magpio.
Beautiful. Rename it right now.
Another former guest on the podcast. I think one of our best interviews we've ever done. Just 25 minutes of just straight ball talk. And we talked about how unique it is to have young guards like Barrington Hargress and Isaiah Moses that can take a step up coming into this year, how they've emerged as leaders within the program, within the community, and how you can keep guys like that around in a mid-major league. It's a miracle that they're still there, and it's a miracle that's going to launch UC Riverside to be one of the best teams in this conference. Right, Jonathan? Oh, yeah. And also another guy you didn't really mention much, but Will Tattersall is a player I really like.
Oh, absolutely. And he's really critical as well to their success.
Yes.
Yeah, like UC Riverside's my pick to win the league. Like I think they're going to take a huge jump. I said when I did my top 100 that I threw them in there at team number 100 just to kind of give them a shout out. I don't know if they'll actually finish top 100, but I think they do have a shot with this backcourt and all the guys they brought in. Like they were very excited. It sounded like for Parker Strauss when they brought him in. He was a high recruit at Northwestern, a guy that might be really talented and really fit for this league. I mean, I would just bet on Joe Pasternak not having another year like they did last year. Like it seems like their roster construction is much better this year. They have way more shooting, so I'd bet they have a bounce back year. We mentioned UC San Diego. Like Eric Olin kind of was in a weird situation because like he won a lot of games at the Division II level, and then their first year in Division I was the weird COVID year where games were getting canceled all the time. So like you got to deal with all the California restrictions, and you're adjusting to playing at a higher level with a lot of the same players. And then like the other team that I don't think we really mentioned was UC Davis. Like they need somebody else to step up, but they might have the best player in the league in Ty Johnson. I wouldn't be surprised if they had a good year if he was the player of the year. And then like Sam, I know like we like Mike DeGeorge, new coach at Cal Poly. Chris Acker, new coach at Long Beach. Hawaii. What's up?
5 COVID year guys at Cal Poly.
Yeah, and then Hawaii's always a tough place to go.
They're not good, but like they could be better.
Yeah, Hawaii's a tough, obviously, road trip to go play at. Like,
and I kind of got Nemeska from Xavier.
Yeah, at the end of the year last year, I was trying my hardest to stay up for some more Big West games and really watch the games. There are so many intriguing teams in this league that I think are going to be fun watches this year. Yeah. Like this is like for a guy who grew up in the Midwest and now goes to college in the Midwest. Like this is one of the most exciting leagues, mid-major leagues, I should say, in the country, and they should get like a lot more respect than I feel like they do on a national scale.
Agreed. Yeah, no doubt. And I think, some of these coaches that have been around like Pasternak and certainly Turner and even at Cal State Fullerton, Dedrick Taylor's done a great job. Every year, sometimes they start really slow and you kind of forget about Fullerton and then they come on strong almost every year. And those are the most impressive programs to me, are the ones that just stick with it regardless of record. And by Big West tournament time, Fullerton's going to be a handful. They've got a lot of unknown pieces once again this year. But so many coaches, like look at Dedrick Taylor himself is building a coaching tree. And so, there's so much respect across this league. And now you got like a wild card, like Andy Newman came in with Cal State Northridge. And you look at
by the way, I will get to see Cal State Northridge in person on November 6th.
Beautiful. They're coming out to the Bonaventure / Lemoyne area.
Yeah. So excited for that. So random. I will try and get like 20 minutes.
Crazy. Yeah, I think the only real known commodity is Keontae Jones, who can really play. But the rest of the roster is just freakishly athletic. And that's Andy Newman's basically building his roster like it's a G League. So they pick up a PJ Fuller, who didn't even play last year, but he's played at Washington. He started at Washington, played at TCU. And like now this dude's like 23, 24 years old. Scotty Washington was a great athlete for Cal Baptist, still only a junior. Adams comes down from BYU, used to be a top 50 recruit. I mean, everywhere you look, even the JUCO guys. So the two Pacific guys make me a little nervous. I know Tyler Beard was in and out of trouble at Pacific. Judson Martindale was, obviously part of that Pacific program of the last few years. There's a lot of losing there. So Andy's challenge now is get those guys to change their mindset. But I think his goal is just to grab about 10, 11 athletes, figure out by January, March, when these Big West games are big time, what his best combos are. And you might see some big surprises coming from Northridge.
Yeah. Jalen Barbie, too, big time shooter at the JUCO level last year.
JUCO, yeah. So
80-something threes last year at the JUCO level. Like, I mean,
right.
If you can shoot, you can shoot. Like, this isn't like a carryover thing, obviously. But yeah, do we have anything else to add here on the Big West?
I would say there's an actual, this might bite me later, but I think there's an actual chance that Cal Poly is better than Long Beach this year. I just think Long Beach is a lot younger and, not to take too much from a scrimmage, but they got completely bloodied up in their first scrimmage, and maybe that doesn't matter. But and I think some of the guys that Long Beach took were a little to fill the roster. The thing about Acker is he's an incredible recruiter. So I think by year 3, Long Beach is going to be in great shape. But I think this is a big time rebuild this year based on this first roster.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm very low on Long Beach State. I don't like this roster. I don't like Devin Askew either. I don't think he's very good.
Yeah, you got guys like Cam Denson and a lot of people that have lost.
Devin Askew could be one of the best to ever put on the uniform, Jonathan.
Yeah, one of the best
Beard,
ever.
man.
I'm the weird thing about Long Beach is it's just such a, like you mentioned, the big time rebuild. Part of the reason for that is
the hire.
You had also no young pieces really to build up. All of Long Beach's best players last year were legitimately good players that moved up a level or just graduated. Period. So
and that clearly shows Monson knew going into the year he was on the hot seat, and it didn't matter. They got into the tournament anyway. They got rid of him anyway. But any coach, you guys track this just as much as me, if not more. But any coach going into a hot seat year in this portal NIL era that we live in today. There's 2 things you can count on. One, they're going to schedule as many wins as they can get from a scheduling perspective, and 2, they're going to get as many old dudes as they possibly can, and not worried about the year after.
All right, Rocco. I know we didn't have this on our guide, but I do want to bring up 2 other leagues out there that just to go over very quickly. I don't really want to go much further over the 2-hour mark. But Big Sky and WAC. We'll probably do more on Grand Canyon on the night before, so just don't talk about Grand Canyon. Anything else on the WAC or the Big Sky, just really quickly, player of the year type guys to look out for. What teams you think have a chance to win that league?
Yeah, I'll start with the WAC just because I think I have a team that's pretty high. Sean Paul and I are going to be hosting the Field of 68's mid-major show starting next week. So one of the exercises we've done is we've each, you guys probably know I do a top 60, and what we call mid-major is basically everything below the WCC. So it's the other 22 leagues that are not in those high major caliber multi-bid type of leagues. And I'm huge on UT Arlington. I've got them number 7 in my rankings.
Yes.
And Deontay Smith and Darius Burford are both individually good enough to
Such
both
a random
be,
combo.
Yeah, well, it's KT Turner's a Kentucky guy. He's an elite recruiter.
Yeah, they had a random combo last year. It was Philip Russell and DeJuan Gordon.
That's right, and they went to the WAC championship game, right? So
they had a fight with Grand Canyon.
Yeah, they knocked off Tarleton, who did finish second, but UTA got third. I don't even think UTA drops off at all. I think they actually improve with this new roster. Lance Ware comes in as a grad, and so does Jaden Wells. Jaden Wells D2, Lance Ware, Villanova bench guy. So I love the JUCOs they brought in. Talbot was really a key glue guy last year. I really, and and here's the thing, guys. All these teams are out there for scheduling. WAC is one of the hardest leagues to get teams to play against because they're stuck in the middle. They're just good enough to not trust to buy, and they're just bad enough to where analytically you don't want to buy them either. So they keep getting stuck at the very end scheduling. But UT Arlington was completely ignored by good teams. They didn't want to take the risk and play in this team. That usually tells me they're going to be pretty darn good. So that's my team out of there. But I think Seattle U, also another team where they bring in Alexander Moncrief, who's been around forever, came from the SEC, Malik Arrington, great, good scorer at Idaho State, and then also Maldonado coming in, a Metro State All-Star, to go along with guys like John Christophilus, who had a great season last year, Kobe Williamson, et cetera. I expect Seattle to be probably top 3 or 4 in the WAC. And Tarleton's got all new guys, but they're going to be super annoying to play, do their ball pressure stuff. Same with Abilene Christian. Cal Baptist has Dominic Daniels Jr. He's player of the year capable, certainly will probably be the leading scorer in the league maybe. So those are the teams to look for in the WAC. Any other WAC thoughts, and then we can jump into Big Sky?
I mean, I don't really have many WAC thoughts. I like UT Arlington just like you do. So I think that's a really good shout for you. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not missing anything in the WAC because it is
Utah Valley. I'm hearing good things on Utah Valley.
I like Todd Phillips. I think
he's the rosters. the roster's supposed to be a little improved. It's just some of those guys I haven't seen play, so I'm a little wait and see still.
I mean, I think I like Freddie Hicks at Tarleton too. And Southern Utah, I'm not sure what to think of them. And Utah Tech, I think Judkin's pretty good.
They got a good culture down there.
Yeah, like Seattle's probably, in my opinion, the second best team in the league. I know they lost some key guys, but they also got some guys back that played legit minutes for them last year and had good years, and their transfer class was excellent. They do a good job up there. Duke also plays them, so like when I saw that game came out, I'm like,
right.
Like that's one of those.
The first thing that I want to talk about in the Big Sky, I like Weber's roster. I know we just saw them get blown out by Utah State, but Blaze Street, Miguel Tomley, Nigel Burris was the freshman of the year in that league 2 years ago. Alex Chu, Dylan Kohler. I think that's a really good starting five, and I liked Viljami Vartanen in that game against Utah State. So I think they are a threat to win that league.
Yeah, Weber's interesting because without Dylan Jones, they dropped off quite a bit. He missed a couple games here and there the last 2 years. Now they bring in.
Hold on. The threat to win this league, I just realized that they're going to be really good, but the team that is going to win this league is going to be Montana.
That's what I have as well. I
don't really have my organized thoughts on the Big Sky, but yeah, Montana, they're going to win this league.
Well, yeah, I mean, if as long as Money Williams stays healthy, I think a lot of people are forgetting about him.
I don't think anyone's forgetting about him. I think that's like everyone's.
Well, I think higher leagues were forgetting about him when they didn't offer him enough NIL. But that's a blessing for the Grizz, and I think this is a team. As long as he's a difference maker, especially making that freshman sophomore jump. He was already between him and Malik Mack at the midway point of last year. They were my two favorite freshmen in all of whatever you want to call it, mid-major basketball. And now Money gets hopefully a clean bill of health so you can take that next step. But like you said, they have a lot of good supporting cast. I actually think the best long-term coach in this league is going to be Matt Logie, who got to the tournament in year one. And they have, I actually think Montana State wins the regular season. I'm going to take Montana to make a magical run to steal the bid. So that way I can split up my love. But they still have a lot of that core back from last year. And by the time, if you watch the Big Sky tournament, I know Eastern got upset for the second straight year against a 10 seed. But from that point forward, Montana State, like they played Weber in the quarters, they played that Sac State upset team in the semis, and then in the finals they were dominant. There's no reason why Montana State shouldn't be able to carry that forward and win the regular season.
And then there's
Idaho. I like Idaho.
Yeah, they spent a lot of money this year.
They did, and they just beat Portland in a scrimmage. If you care about that, but hey, bottom WCC win is any kind of win is good for Idaho.
And then there's Northern Arizona, who brings back everybody
except for Liam Lloyd, who went to play for his dad. But I think they're interesting. Some of these programs like Northern Arizona and Northern Colorado.
That's my one thing.
Northern Colorado is another one to keep your eye on too. Like
who is this year's Dalton/St. Thomas?
I don't know if they have one. Do they?
They don't. They won't. It's there's no chance.
Unless it's one of these redshirt freshmen or somebody.
I'm very fascinated though by Tayshaud Jackson from VMI. Can shoot it a little. Really good. Average 10 rebounds a game.
I don't think he's a high major guy though.
No, I don't know if he's a high major guy, but
it's interesting that they have Hawthorne. I've seen him play a lot from San Francisco. He'll if he keeps his attitude up, like he had a bad attitude at San Francisco, that's why I ended up here. But he's got the skills to be an all-league Big Sky guy.
And I was kind of surprised that Quinn Denker left Idaho for another team in the league.
Yeah, that might have like you said. I think Idaho is one of the best resource teams, along with the two Montana schools, in terms of being able to acquire talent. So that might have been hey, let's agree to part ways type of deal for whatever reason.
That's all I got. Jonathan, anything else?
That's all I got too. I think the two Montana schools is going to be some fascinating.
I don't know why I started with Weber State. I think it's because I watched them.
Yeah.
Well,
But,
when they have a first
Montana
round,
and
when you
Montana
have a
State.
first, when you have a first round pick in the Big Sky, kind of rolls off the tongue.
No. I watched them like this week.
Oh, okay. You saw that Utah State game, yeah.
I was watching for Utah State, really, but Weber wasn't bad. But yeah, two best teams in the Big Sky, Montana State. If you came to hear about Tyler Self and where he's working, you came to the right place. If you came to hear about the UC Riverside Mike Magpios, you came to the right place. And if you came to hear about the latest happenings with Caleb Grill, you came to the right place. This is Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers, Season 5, Episode 28, our West Coast mid-major preview with the great, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Rocco Miller. Thank you so much for joining us, Rocco. We'll see you tomorrow night, A10. I love the West Coast, but the A10 is so much more of my jam. Let's do this tomorrow night with Tyler Cronin. We'll see you then.